There are moments in life when you realize that the people you'd die for wouldn't even pause their day to save yours. I'm 60 years old now, and I thought I'd seen every kind of pain this world could offer. I buried my husband when I was barely 28, raised our son alone, worked until my hands bled and my bones ached. I built a life from nothing but determination and love. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the betrayal that would come from the hands that once reached for mine in the darkness, calling Mama when nightmares woke him. My name is Martha, and this is the story of how my own son tried to kill me for a house. I remember the exact moment I first felt it, that strange heaviness in my limbs that seemed to come from nowhere. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way except for the fatigue that had begun wrapping itself around me like a wet blanket. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd taught Daniel to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl, where we'd celebrated his graduations and birthdays with cakes I'd baked from scratch because store-bought always seemed too impersonal for my boy. If you enjoy stories that touch the heart, please subscribe to our channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and it truly helps our work. And comment below with which city you're watching from. The house around me felt different that evening. 32 years I'd lived within these walls. Walls I'd built with money earned from cleaning offices at dawn, waiting tables until midnight, and taking in sewing on weekends. Every brick, every window, every floorboard represented a sacrifice, a choice to give my son a foundation I never had. My husband, God rest his soul, died in a construction accident 3 months after Daniel was born. The company paid almost nothing. His family wanted nothing to do with us. I was alone with a baby and a dream that seemed impossible, to give him a home that could never be taken away. And I did it. I did it. But lately, something had been wrong. At first, I thought it was just age catching up with me. 60 isn't old, not really. But when you've worked as hard as I have, your body keeps score. The exhaustion started small, needing an extra cup of coffee in the morning, sitting down more often while cooking, that strange fog in my mind that made me forget why I'd walked into a room. Daniel noticed before I did. "Mom, you look tired," he said one evening, appearing in the kitchen doorway with that concerned expression I'd seen so many times when he was young and worried about me. "Let me make you some tea." My heart swelled. My beautiful boy, now 32 years old, successful in his career, still thoughtful enough to care for his aging mother. I settled into my favorite chair, the one by the window where I could watch the garden I'd planted the year Daniel started school, and let him fuss over me. The tea was chamomile with honey, just the way I liked it, and he brought it to me with a kiss on my forehead that made me feel, for just a moment, that everything I'd sacrificed had been worth it. "You work too hard, Mom," he said, sitting across from me. "You should rest more. Let me take care of things around here." I smiled at him. This man who still called me Mom with such tenderness, who visited every week even though he had his own apartment across town, who seemed genuinely worried about my health. How could I have known? How could any mother know that the hands preparing her tea were the same hands measuring out her death, spoonful by careful spoonful? The fatigue grew worse over the following weeks. My legs felt like they were filled with sand, and some mornings I could barely lift myself out of bed. My appetite vanished. Food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach churned with nausea that came in waves. I started losing weight, my clothes hanging loose on a frame that had always been sturdy, strong from years of physical labor. Daniel became more attentive. He started coming by every evening, always with that tea, always with gentle words about how I needed to take it easy, how I'd earned my rest after all these years. He'd sit with me while I drank it, watching with eyes I thought were filled with love, asking about my day, telling me about his work. Normal conversation between a mother and son. Nothing seemed wrong, nothing except the way my body was slowly, inexplicably shutting down. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he suggested one evening, but something in his tone made me hesitate. It wasn't quite concern. It was more like someone going through the motions, saying what they should say. But I dismissed the thought. This was Daniel, my boy, the child I'd protected from every hurt this world had tried to inflict on him. I did go to the doctor eventually, when the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Dr. Patterson had been my physician for 15 years, and the worry in his eyes when he examined me sent the first real spike of fear through my chest. He ordered tests, blood work, scans, everything he could think of. The results would take a few days, he said, but he prescribed some vitamins and told me to rest, to stay hydrated, to take it easy. That night, Daniel brought me dinner along with the tea. Soup he said he'd made himself, though I noticed the container looked suspiciously like takeout. I was too tired to eat much, but I forced down a few spoonfuls to please him. He seemed disappointed that I wasn't finishing it, pushing the bowl closer to me with an insistence that felt strange, urgent. "You need to keep your strength up, Mom," he said, and for the first time, I heard something in his voice that made my skin prickle. Was it impatience? Frustration? I told myself I was being paranoid, that the illness was making me imagine things that weren't there. But mothers know. Somewhere deep in our bones, in that place where we first felt our children move inside us, we know when something is terribly, irrevocably wrong. I just wasn't ready to believe what my instincts were trying to tell me. The house felt different now in the evenings. The walls that had always meant safety began to feel like they were closing in, watching, waiting. I'd walk through rooms filled with memories, Daniel's first steps taken right there by the sofa, his homework spread across the dining table, his laughter echoing from the backyard where I'd pushed him on the swing I'd installed myself because we couldn't afford a playset. Every corner held a piece of our life together, our story of survival and love. How could that same story be turning into my nightmare? I started having trouble sleeping, not just from the physical symptoms, but from dreams that left me gasping in the darkness. Dreams where Daniel's face would shift into something I didn't recognize, where his hands would reach for me, not in comfort, but with intent I couldn't quite see but could feel in every trembling nerve. One night, I woke at 3 a.m. with my heart racing and stumbled to the bathroom. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My face was gaunt, my eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles that looked like bruises. My hair, which I'd always kept neat, hung limp and dull around my shoulders. I looked like I was dying, and somewhere in the house, I could hear Daniel's key turning in the front door, a key I'd given him years ago, never imagining it would become the key to my prison. I heard him moving through the house, quiet, careful. Why was he here so late? I stayed in the bathroom, suddenly afraid to make my presence known, listening to the soft sounds of cabinet doors opening in the kitchen, the clink of glass, water running. He was making something, preparing something. My tea, I realized. My nightly tea that I'd come to depend on, that helped me sleep, that he'd told me would make me feel better. The tea I'd been drinking for weeks while my body betrayed me cell by cell. I stood there in my bathroom, gripping the sink with hands that had worked so hard to build a life, to create a home, to give my son everything I never had. And for the first time, I let myself think the unthinkable. What if Daniel wasn't trying to help me? What if my son, my beautiful boy, my reason for living, what if he was the reason I was dying? The thought was so monstrous, so completely impossible, that I pushed it away. But it didn't go far. It stayed there, crouched in the corner of my mind, waiting for the evidence I wasn't ready to see. Daniel called out softly, "Mom, are you awake? I brought your tea." I looked at my reflection one more time, this ghost of the woman who had survived widowhood and poverty, who had built something from nothing, who had never, ever given up. And I made a decision. I would drink the tea. I would smile at my son. I would continue as if nothing had changed. But I would also start paying attention. Because if there's one thing 32 years of fighting for survival had taught me, it was this. Trust your instincts, even when your heart wants to deny them. Especially then. I opened the bathroom door and smiled at Daniel, who stood in the hallway holding a steaming cup, looking for all the world like a devoted son caring for his ailing mother. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, taking the cup with trembling hands. "What would I do without you?" His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You'll never have to find out, Mom. I'll always take care of you." And as I raised the cup to my lips, I wondered, was that a promise or a threat? The test results came back on a Thursday morning, and Dr. Patterson's voice on the phone carried a gravity that made my already weak knees buckle. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Daniel with his homework, where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd signed the final mortgage payment with tears of joy streaming down my face. "Martha, I need you to come in immediately," he said. "Don't eat or drink anything until we talk. Do you understand?" Nothing at all. Something in his tone told me this wasn't a suggestion. This was urgent. This was serious. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a pause, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to face. "I'd rather discuss this in person. Can someone drive you? I don't think you should be behind the wheel right now." I told him I'd find a way and hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the button to end the call. Daniel was at work, or so he'd said when he'd left after bringing me breakfast. Oatmeal that I'd forced myself to eat a few bites of while he watched with that strange intensity that had become normal somehow. I called my neighbor, Patricia, a woman my age who'd lived next door for almost as long as I'd been in this house. She came over within minutes, took one look at my face, and simply said, "Get your purse." In Dr. Patterson's office, the truth came crashing down like a building collapsing floor by floor, each revelation more devastating than the last. "Martha," he said, sitting across from me with my file open in front of him, "your blood work shows elevated levels of arsenic, significant levels. This isn't environmental exposure. Someone is poisoning you." The room seemed to tilt. Poisoning. The word felt foreign, impossible, like something from a television drama, not something that happened to a 60-year-old woman who'd spent her life working honestly and hurting no one. That's not possible," I stammered. "How? Who would—" But even as I asked, I knew. My body knew before my mind could accept it. Every evening, every cup of tea, every concerned smile and gentle word. Daniel. Dr. Patterson was already calling the police, his voice firm and professional as he explained the situation to whoever answered. I sat there, frozen, while Patricia held my hand so tightly I thought my fingers might break. But I needed that pressure, that pain, to remind me this was real. The police came. They asked questions I could barely answer through the fog of disbelief. They wanted to know who had access to my food, who prepared my meals, who I trusted. And with each answer, I watched them exchange glances that confirmed what I couldn't yet say out loud. They collected samples from my kitchen, the tea, the honey, even the vitamins Daniel had brought me last week, saying they'd help with my energy. Everything went into evidence bags while I stood in my own home feeling like a stranger, like I'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. "Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you a difficult question," the detective said, a woman about Daniel's age with kind eyes that had probably seen too much cruelty. "Who stands to inherit your property?" "My property. My house. The house I'd built with my own hands, metaphorically, and sometimes literally. The house that was supposed to be Daniel's legacy, his security, his foundation the way I'd never had one." "My son," I whispered. "Daniel. Everything goes to Daniel." She nodded slowly, writing something in her notepad. "And does your son visit regularly? Does he have access to your home?" Every day I wanted to scream. "He has a key. He makes my tea. He brings my food. He sits with me and tells me he loves me while I'm dying from what he's feeding me." But I couldn't say it. Not yet. Because saying it would make it true, and making it true would mean accepting that the child I'd grown inside my body, the baby I'd nursed and protected and sacrificed everything for, had decided I was worth more dead than alive. "Yes," I managed. "He comes every day." They asked if I had somewhere else to stay, somewhere safe. Patricia immediately offered her home, and I nodded numbly. The detective explained that they'd need to investigate, collect more evidence, that I shouldn't confront Daniel until they had everything they needed for an arrest. An arrest. My son. My Daniel. I packed a bag while Patricia waited, moving through my house like a ghost, touching things that suddenly felt precious because I didn't know if I'd ever feel safe here again. The quilt my mother had made, the only thing I had of hers. The photo albums documenting Daniel's life from infant to man. His baby shoes, bronzed and sitting on the mantel. A reminder of those tiny feet that had learned to walk holding my hands. How had those hands grown into ones that could poison his own mother? At Patricia's house, I finally broke down. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't know I contained such pain. She held me while I cried. This woman who was more stranger than friend until that moment, who asked no questions and offered no platitudes, who just let me grieve for the son I'd lost, not to death, but to something far worse. That night, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button. The detective had said not to let on that I knew anything, to act normal, to help them build their case. I answered, "Mom? Where are you? I came by with dinner and you're not home. Are you okay?" His voice was perfect, concerned, loving, everything a good son should be. If I didn't know better, I would have melted at his worry, but I did know better now. I knew that concern was theater, that love was manipulation, that every word was designed to keep me compliant until I was too weak to fight back. "I'm at Patricia's," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. I wasn't feeling well, and she offered to let me rest here for the night. A pause. Was it my imagination, or did I hear frustration in his silence? "Oh," he said finally. "Well, that's probably good. You need rest. Did you eat anything? Did you eat the poison I prepared for you?" He meant, "Did you consume your daily dose of death?" "Patricia made me some soup," I lied. I hadn't been able to eat anything since Dr. Patterson's call. "I'm going to sleep now, sweetheart." "I'll call you tomorrow." "Wait, Mom. I can bring you your tea, the one that helps you sleep. You need—" "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. I softened my tone. "No, thank you, baby. Patricia has some chamomile here. I'll be fine. Good night." I hung up before he could protest, then turned off my phone completely. Patricia had been listening from the doorway, and when I looked up at her, I saw my own horror reflected in her expression. "He wanted to bring you more," she said. Not a question, but a statement of terrible understanding. I nodded. "He's been poisoning me for months, Patricia. My own son has been slowly killing me, and I smiled at him every time he handed me that cup. I thanked him for taking care of me." She sat beside me on the guest bed, and we sat in silence for a long time. What was there to say? What words existed for a betrayal this profound? The next morning, the detective called. The preliminary tests on my kitchen items had come back. The tea was contaminated. The honey, even the vitamins. Daniel had been systematic, patient, thorough in his attempt to murder his own mother. "We need to move carefully," Detective Morrison explained. "We're building a case, but we need more evidence for it to be airtight. Can you continue to interact with him normally? Record conversations if possible?" She was asking me to face my would-be killer with a smile, to pretend I didn't know my son was trying to erase me from existence for the sake of a house and whatever money he thought I had hidden away. Could I do that? Could I look into eyes I'd once gazed at with wonder, seeing my own features reflected back, and pretend I didn't know they belonged to someone who wanted me dead? I thought about the house, my house, built with broken nails and aching backs and determination that refused to break even when everything else did. I thought about the life insurance policy I'd taken out years ago, small but enough to make me worth more dead than alive to someone motivated by greed. And I thought about justice. Not revenge. I was too tired, too heartbroken for revenge. But justice. The kind that says you can't destroy someone who gave you everything and walk away unscathed. "Yes," I told the detective, "I can do that." Because if there was one thing 32 years of survival had taught me, it was this. I was stronger than anyone gave me credit for. Even my son, who had mistaken my love for weakness, had forgotten that the woman who built a life from nothing was not the kind of woman who would go quietly into death. He wanted to take my house. He would get nothing but the justice he deserved, and I would make sure of it. The hardest part wasn't knowing that my son wanted me dead. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know, looking into his eyes and seeing a stranger wearing my child's face, while acting like everything was normal, like a mother's love could survive anything, even this. I went back home after 3 days at Patricia's. The detective said it would look suspicious if I stayed away too long, that Daniel might realize something had changed. So I returned to my house, the house that now felt like a crime scene, where every surface might hold traces of my attempted murder, where the son I'd raised had methodically planned my death. Daniel came by that evening right on schedule, carrying takeout containers and wearing that expression of concern I now recognized as a mask. "Mom, you're back." I was so worried. He kissed my forehead, and I had to suppress a flinch. How are you feeling? You look a little better. Of course I looked better. I hadn't been ingesting poison for 3 days. I'm okay, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Just tired. He unpacked the food. Chinese, my favorite. Or at least what used to be my favorite before I learned that love could be laced with arsenic. He'd brought my usual sweet and sour chicken, fried rice, egg rolls. The same meal we'd shared hundreds of times over the years, mother and son bonding over takeout containers and conversation about our days. But now I watched his hands with new eyes, watched how he prepared my plate, how he was careful not to mix up our portions. Was he being considerate, or was he being careful? Was there something in mine that wasn't in his? I'll make your tea, he offered, already moving toward the kitchen. No, I said quickly. Too quickly. His eyes sharpened, and I saw a flicker of something I'd never noticed before. Calculation. I'm trying to cut back on caffeine. Doctor's orders. He thinks it might be affecting my sleep. It wasn't entirely a lie. Dr. Patterson had indeed given me instructions, just not about caffeine. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Since when? You love your evening tea, Mom. You always say it helps you relax. There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. Not quite accusatory, but persistent. Like he needed me to drink it. Like his plan depended on it. Well, I'm trying something different, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. I'm sure you understand. Health changes at my age. He stared at me for a long moment, and in that silence, I felt the weight of everything unsaid between us. Did he suspect that I knew? Was he wondering why his mother, who'd been growing weaker and more compliant by the day, was suddenly making decisions about her own health? Of course, Mom, he said finally, his smile not reaching his eyes. Whatever you think is best. We ate in uncomfortable silence, and I forced down food that tasted like sawdust, acutely aware of his gaze on me every time I took a bite. The recording device the police had given me sat heavy in my cardigan pocket, capturing every word, every silence, every moment of this grotesque performance. After he left, I stood at my kitchen sink and washed dishes with trembling hands, crying silently while soap suds dissolved down the drain. This was my life now, a theater production where I played the role of the dying mother, unaware that her loving son was writing her final act. The next few weeks were a study in psychological torture. Daniel came by every day, always with food, always offering to make tea, always watching me with those calculating eyes that I'd once thought held nothing but love. He started bringing other things too. A new pillow that would help with my neck pain, vitamins that were specially formulated for women my age, herbal supplements that he'd researched extensively. I thanked him for each gift and quietly turned everything over to the police, watching as they bagged and tagged the evidence of my son's sustained attempt to murder me. But it wasn't just Daniel anymore. He'd started bringing his girlfriend, Amanda, a woman I'd met a few times, always polite but distant, with eyes that evaluated everything like an appraiser at an estate sale. She'd walk through my house, commenting on the vintage furniture, the charming details, the potential of the space. You know, Martha, she said one afternoon, running her hand along the mantel where Daniel's baby shoes sat. This house is really too big for one person. Have you ever thought about downsizing? Moving into something more manageable? The audacity took my breath away. Here was this woman, probably 30 years old, telling me, the woman who built this house with her own sacrifice, that I should give it up. For what? For whom? For them? This is my home, I said quietly, but firmly. I built it. I'm not going anywhere. She exchanged a look with Daniel, and I saw it clearly. The communication between conspirators. The shared frustration at an obstacle that wouldn't move. How long had they been planning this? How long had my son and his girlfriend been imagining their life in my house, sleeping in my bedroom, erasing every trace of my existence? Mom's just attached to the place, Daniel said with a laugh that sounded forced. You know how older people get about their homes. Sentimental. Older people. As if my attachment to the house I'd built was some kind of senile confusion, rather than a legitimate claim to the life I'd created. As if my feelings were quaint and outdated, obstacles to be overcome rather than respected. Amanda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course, I understand. It's just that Daniel worries about you here all alone. What if something happened? What if you fell or got sick and no one was here to help? What if I died, she meant. What if the poison finally did its work and I collapsed in this house, alone, while they waited to inherit what I'd built? I'm fine, I said, my voice harder than I intended. I can take care of myself. I'd been taking care of myself since I was 28 years old, widowed and broke. I'd been taking care of myself and a baby, working jobs that destroyed my body but kept us fed. I'd been taking care of myself through every challenge life had thrown at me, and I wasn't about to stop now, especially not for the convenience of people who wanted me gone. But they kept coming, kept pushing. Daniel started bringing real estate brochures for lovely assisted living communities where I could make friends my own age and not worry about home maintenance. He talked about power of attorney, about how I should plan for the future while I was still capable of making decisions. Every conversation was designed to make me feel incompetent, incapable, like a burden that needed to be managed. And every conversation was recorded, the evidence mounting, the case against him growing stronger. The worst moment came on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel had brought Amanda and another couple I'd never met, friends of theirs apparently, who were looking to buy in the neighborhood. They walked through my house like it was already theirs, pointing out updates that would be needed, discussing renovation potential, planning the destruction of everything I'd built, and the creation of something that suited their aesthetic. I sat in my own living room, invisible, while they talked around me and over me and through me, as if I were already gone, as if I were already a ghost in my own home. The kitchen would need to be gutted, Amanda said, standing in the space where I'd cooked thousands of meals, where I'd taught Daniel to bake cookies and make pancakes. Everything's so outdated. The master bedroom is decent-sized, Daniel added, leading them upstairs to the room where I'd slept alone for 32 years, where I'd cried myself to sleep after my husband died, where I'd lain awake worrying about bills and Daniel's future. Good bones. Just needs modernizing. Good bones. That's what he saw when he looked at my life. Something with good bones that could be stripped down and rebuilt into something better. Something without me in it. I followed them on trembling legs, the recording device in my pocket capturing every word of this grotesque house tour, this preview of my erasure. They didn't even notice I was there. So absorbed were they in their plans, their future, their vision of a life that required my absence. In my bedroom, Amanda opened my closet and wrinkled her nose. We definitely need to clear all this out. Maybe donate it? Some of it looks vintage enough to be worth something. My clothes. The dresses I'd worn to Daniel's school events. The Sunday outfit I'd saved for months to buy. The coat I'd had for 20 years because quality clothing, when you could afford it, was meant to last. All of it dismissed as clutter to be removed. Obstacles to their perfect home. Something broke inside me then. Not my spirit. I was too angry for that. But the last thread of hope that maybe, somehow, I'd misunderstood. Maybe Daniel still loved me, somewhere deep down. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake. But there was no mistake. There was only calculation, greed, and an impatience for me to die that they weren't even bothering to hide anymore. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through their chatter. They all turned, seemingly surprised to find me standing there. This is still my house. These are still my things. And I am still alive. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's face flushed red. Embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell anymore. "Mom, we're just talking. Just planning ahead. Planning for my death," I interrupted, and watched his face go pale. "That's what you mean, isn't it? Planning for when I'm gone? Except I'm not gone, Daniel. I'm right here." Amanda and their friends made hasty excuses and left, practically running out of my house. Daniel stayed, his expression morphing from shock to something I'd never seen before. Cold, hard resentment. "You're being dramatic," he said flatly. "We're just trying to help you prepare." "Help me prepare to die?" I asked. "Or help me die so you can have what you want?" The words hung between us, and for a moment, I thought he might confess. I thought I might see remorse, guilt, some flicker of the boy who used to cry when he accidentally stepped on an ant. Instead, he laughed. Actually laughed. "You've always been paranoid, Mom. Always thinking the worst of people. Maybe that's why you're alone." He left then, and I stood in my bedroom surrounded by the things he'd dismissed as worthless, feeling more invisible than I ever had in my entire life. But I wasn't alone. The recording device had captured everything. And somewhere in that conversation, in his cold dismissal and casual cruelty, he'd given the police exactly what they needed. I was invisible in my own story, yes, but invisible people see everything. And I had seen enough. There comes a point when you stop fighting and just exist. When the weight of betrayal becomes so heavy that you can't lift it anymore, so you just carry it, hunched over, waiting for it to finally crush you completely. I reached that point on a cold Wednesday evening, sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea I'd made myself, chamomile, nothing added, perfectly safe, and realizing I couldn't even drink it. Daniel had poisoned more than just my body. He'd poisoned every small comfort, every moment of peace, every simple pleasure I'd once taken for granted. A cup of tea wasn't just a cup of tea anymore. It was a reminder that my own son had used my routines, my trust, my love against me. The house felt enormous around me, echoing with silence that seemed to mock every sacrifice I'd made. All those years of working myself to exhaustion, denying myself everything so Daniel could have better. For what? So he could calculate the monetary value of my death? So he could walk through these rooms with strangers, planning my erasure like I was already buried? I walked through my home that night like a ghost visiting her own past. In the living room, I touched the wall where I'd marked Daniel's height every year on his birthday, watching him grow from a tiny boy to the man who now wanted me dead. The marks were still there, faint pencil lines with dates written beside them in my careful handwriting. Daniel, age 5, 3-7. Daniel, age 10, 4-5. Daniel, age 16, 5-10. I traced them with my finger, remembering each year, each celebration, each moment I'd thought was building toward something beautiful. A legacy of love, a bond that would last beyond my lifetime. What a fool I'd been. In his old bedroom, the one he'd moved out of 10 years ago, but I'd kept exactly as he left it, I sat on the bed that seemed too small now for the monster he'd become. His high school trophies still lined the shelves. Soccer, debate team, academic achievement. I'd been at every game, every competition, every award ceremony, bursting with pride for this boy who was going to do great things. And he had done great things, I supposed. He'd successfully planned his mother's murder with patience and precision. That took a certain kind of intelligence, a certain kind of dedication. I picked up his senior photo from the nightstand, studying that young face full of potential and promise. When had he changed? When had the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, calling them flowers fit for a queen, become someone who could measure arsenic into his mother's tea? Or had he always been this person, and I'd been too blinded by love to see it? The thought was unbearable. It meant every moment of joy I'd felt watching him grow, every swell of maternal pride, every sacrifice I'd thought was worth it. All of it had been built on a foundation of self-deception. I'd loved an illusion, raised a stranger, devoted my life to someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to what he wanted. I lay down on his childhood bed and stared at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars still formed constellations we'd put up together when he was 8. He'd been so excited about astronomy that year, checking out library books about planets and galaxies, making me quiz him on the names of stars. "When I grow up," he'd said one night as we lay in this same bed, looking at those plastic stars, "I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me. You'll never have to work again, Mom. I promise." I'd kissed his forehead and told him all I wanted was for him to be happy, to be kind, to be a good person. I didn't need him to take care of me. I could take care of myself. I just needed him to love me. But somewhere between those innocent promises and now, love had turned to greed. Care had become murder. And my son had decided I was worth more dead than alive. The tears came then, finally, after weeks of holding them back. Great, wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. Years of pain and betrayal pouring out in the darkness of my son's abandoned childhood room. I cried for the boy he'd been, for the mother I'd been, for the future we'd both lost the moment he'd decided to poison me. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was just an empty shell lying on a child's bed, surrounded by memories that had turned rancid. The detective called the next morning, her voice cautious on the phone. "Martha, we've analyzed all the evidence. We have enough to arrest him. We have the poison, the recordings, everything. We can move forward whenever you're ready." Ready? What did ready even mean? Was I ready to watch my son be arrested? To see him in handcuffs? To testify against him? To stand in a courtroom and tell the world that my own child had tried to kill me? "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered into the phone. "He's my son. He tried to murder you," the detective replied, her voice gentle but firm. "He's been poisoning you for months. If you'd kept drinking that tea, if you hadn't gotten medical help when you did, Martha, you'd be dead. And he'd be living in your house, probably with that girlfriend of his forgetting you ever existed." I knew she was right. I knew every word was true. But knowing and accepting are different things, especially when it comes to your own child. Can I have one more day?" I asked. "I just need one more day to what? To hope for a miracle? To fantasize that Daniel would show up, confess, beg for forgiveness, prove that somewhere inside he was still the boy who brought me dandelions?" "One more day," the detective agreed. "But Martha, don't let him into your house. Don't accept anything from him. And please, be careful." I promised I would, but after hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table and wondered what careful even looked like when the person you needed to be careful of was the one you'd given life to. Daniel called that afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but some masochistic part of me needed to hear his voice, needed to see if I could detect any remorse, any hint of the boy I'd loved. "Mom?" I wanted to apologize for yesterday. Amanda and we got carried away. We shouldn't have talked about the house like that. It was disrespectful. His voice was smooth, practiced, an apology designed to manipulate, not to heal. "It's fine, Daniel," I said, my voice flat. "Are you okay? You sound tired." "I am tired," I said. And it was true. I was so tired. Tired of pretending, tired of hoping, tired of loving someone who wanted me dead. "I'll come by tonight," he offered. "Bring dinner. We can talk." Talk. About what? About how much longer I had before his poison finally did its job? About which parts of my house they planned to renovate first? About how quickly he could erase me from existence? "No," I said. "Don't come over. I need some time alone." There was a pause, and I could almost hear him calculating, adjusting his strategy. "Mom, I'm worried about you. You're not yourself lately. Maybe you should see a doctor again. Maybe—" I said no, Daniel. The sharpness in my voice seemed to surprise him. Good. Let him be surprised. Let him wonder what had changed, what I knew, what I was planning. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay, Mom. But call me if you need anything. I love you. I love you." The words that used to fill my heart now made my stomach turn. "Goodbye, Daniel," I said, and hung up without saying it back. "I love you." Did he even know what those words meant? Had he ever? Or had love, for him, always been transactional? Something he performed when it served his purpose, something he discarded when it didn't. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got down on my knees beside my bed and prayed. Not because I'd suddenly found religion, but because I had nowhere else to turn. No husband to hold me, no son to comfort me, no family to rally around me. Just me and the God I wasn't sure I believed in a house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. "I don't know what to do," I whispered into the darkness. "He's my son. He's my baby. How can I—" But I couldn't finish the question because I didn't know what I was asking. How can I let him be arrested? How can I testify against him? How can I survive knowing my own child wanted me dead? The silence that answered me was absolute. No divine intervention, no sudden clarity, no angel descending to tell me everything would be okay. Just silence, and the sound of my own breathing, and the weight of a decision I didn't want to make but could no longer avoid. I climbed into bed, my bed, in my house, in the home I'd built, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't cry. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me. Not hope, Hope had fallen silent weeks ago, crushed under the weight of betrayal and poisoned tea, but something else, something quieter but stronger, something that whispered that maybe, just maybe, I was tired of being invisible, tired of being a victim, tired of letting my love for Daniel destroy me. Maybe it was time to love myself more than I loved the illusion of the son I thought I had. Maybe it was time to fight back, not with poison or cruelty or revenge, but with truth, with justice, with the determination that had built this house brick by brick and survived 32 years of widowhood and poverty and sacrifice. I'd been strong once, strong enough to build a life from nothing, strong enough to raise a child alone, strong enough to survive losing everything except my will to keep going, and somewhere in the weeks of being poisoned, of watching my son plan my death, of feeling invisible in my own story, I'd forgotten that strength, but it was still there, buried under grief and betrayal and exhausted hope, but still there. Daniel wanted my house? He wanted my life insurance? He wanted me gone? He was about to learn that the woman who built something from nothing was not the kind of woman who surrendered what she'd built without a fight. Tomorrow, I would call the detective back. Tomorrow, I would set in motion the events that would bring my son to justice. But tonight, I lay in my bed and let the last remnants of false hope drain away, making room for something sharper, clearer, more useful, because hope might have fallen silent. But I hadn't. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The fog that had settled over my mind, partly from the poison, partly from denial, had lifted. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Gaunt? Yes. Tired. Absolutely. But there was something new in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Determination. I called the detective before I could second-guess myself. "I'm ready," I said simply. "Let's do this." But she surprised me with her response. "Martha, before we move forward with the arrest, I need you to understand something. The case we have is strong, but it could be stronger. If you're willing, and this is entirely your choice, we could gather more evidence. Documented attempts, recorded confessions, proof of intent that would make this case absolutely airtight." My hand tightened on the phone. "What are you asking me to do? Let him keep coming around, keep recording, maybe even let him think the poison is still working." She was asking me to play dead, or rather to play dying, to let my son think his plan was succeeding while we built an irrefutable case against him. The old Martha, the one who'd existed just weeks ago, would have refused, would have said enough was enough, that she couldn't bear one more moment of this torture. But I wasn't that Martha anymore. "How long?" I asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, just enough to establish an undeniable pattern to get him on record showing his intent. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Let's do it. Because here's what I'd realized during that long night of staring at the ceiling. I didn't just want Daniel arrested. I wanted him to face the full weight of what he'd done. I wanted there to be no plea bargains, no reduced sentences, no possibility of him charming his way into a sympathetic jury's heart the way he'd charmed his way through life, using my love as a shield against consequences. I wanted justice. Real, complete, undeniable justice. So I became an actress in the most important performance of my life. I started looking worse deliberately, wearing my baggiest clothes, skipping makeup, shuffling when I walked. I practiced looking weak, confused, defeated. Everything Daniel expected to see in a woman he was slowly poisoning to death. When he came by that evening, I was ready. "Mom?" He knocked gently, using his key to let himself in when I didn't answer right away. "Mom, are you okay?" I was sitting in my armchair by the window, the picture of frailty, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. The recording device was in my cardigan pocket, as always. "Daniel," I said, my voice deliberately weak. "I'm sorry. I must have dozed off." His face lit up with what I now recognized as predatory satisfaction, disguised as concern. "You do look tired, Mom. Have you been eating?" "Not much appetite," I admitted. Which was true. Hard to eat when you know your son wants you dead. "Everything tastes strange lately." "That's exactly why I'm here," he said, pulling containers from a bag. "I brought your favorites. And I made fresh tea, the special blend that always helps you feel better. The special blend. The poison. He said it so smoothly, so naturally, as if he were really trying to help rather than slowly murdering me. I watched him prepare it in my kitchen, noting how careful he was, how precise. This wasn't amateur hour. He'd researched this, planned it, perfected his method. My son, the murderer, was nothing if not thorough. "Here you go," he said, handing me the cup with a smile that would have fooled anyone who didn't know better. "Drink up. You'll feel better, I promise." I took the cup with trembling hands, trembling from rage, though he interpreted it as weakness. "Thank you, sweetheart." I lifted it to my lips, tilted it just enough for him to see me drink, but only let the liquid touch my lips. Not a drop went down my throat. I'd been practicing this maneuver for hours, perfecting the illusion. "All of it, Mom," he encouraged, watching intently. "You need the full dose. I mean, the full cup, for the benefits." The full dose. He'd almost said it out loud, almost revealed himself in his eagerness to see me consume my daily portion of death. I pretended to drink more, even let out a small sigh as if the warm liquid was soothing. "That does help," I lied. "You're such a good son, Daniel. Always taking care of me." Something flickered across his face. Guilt? No, I realized. Impatience. He was tired of this, tired of waiting, tired of making daily visits to ensure I was dying at the proper pace. "Of course, Mom. That's what sons do." He paused, then added carefully, "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we talked about arrangements. For the future. Just in case. Just in case. In case the poison worked. In case I died as planned. In case he could finally have what he wanted." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, playing along. "Well, like we discussed before. Maybe signing power of attorney over to me. Making sure everything is in order. You know, so if anything happens." "When something happens," I interrupted softly, and watched his eyes sharpen. "You mean when, don't you, Daniel? Not if." He backtracked smoothly. "I just mean, you're getting older, Mom, and you've been so sick lately. I worry." "Do you?" I asked, looking directly at him. "Do you worry about me, Daniel? Or do you worry about when I'm going to die so you can have this house?" The temperature in the room dropped. His mask slipped, just for a second, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. "Mom, that's a terrible thing to say." "Is it?" I set down the tea, poisoned tea I hadn't actually drunk, and met his gaze steadily. "Tell me, son, if I died tomorrow, what would you do? Cry at my funeral? Or celebrate finally getting what you want?" He stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger he couldn't quite control. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but I don't appreciate these accusations. I've been nothing but good to you. You've been nothing but good at hiding what you really are," I said quietly. For a moment, I thought he might confess. I thought I might see real emotion, remorse, shame, something human. Instead, he laughed. It was the coldest sound I'd ever heard. "You know what, Mom? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am tired of watching you drain resources, taking up space, holding on to this house like it's some kind of shrine to your martyrdom. You've been dying for weeks. Just hurry up and finish it already." There it was, recorded, clear, undeniable. He seemed to realize what he'd said, how he'd revealed himself, but instead of apologizing or backtracking, he doubled down. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I want this house. Yes, I'm tired of waiting. Yes, every time you call me, every time you need something, I count the cost of keeping you alive versus what I'd gain from your death. And you know what? The math doesn't work in your favor anymore." I sat there, recording every word, feeling strangely calm. This was it. This was what the detective needed. Not just evidence of poisoning, but proof of intent, of motive, of a son so consumed by greed that he could say these things to the mother who gave him everything. "You built this house," he continued, pacing now, words pouring out like poison of a different kind. "You're so proud of that. But you know what I see? Outdated plumbing, old wiring, a foundation that's settling. It's worth money, sure, but only if you're not in it. You're the problem, Mom. You're what's standing between me and the life I deserve. The life you deserve," I repeated softly. "And what life is that, Daniel?" One where I'm not responsible for a sick old woman who refuses to die when she's supposed to. He was shouting now, all pretense gone. Do you know how exhausting it is? Coming here every day, pretending to care, watching you slowly deteriorate and wondering why it's taking so long? I've been patient, Mom. So patient. But my patience has run out. He grabbed his jacket, heading for the door. But at the threshold, he turned back. And what I saw in his face wasn't my son anymore. It was a stranger. A monster. Keep refusing the tea if you want, he said coldly. I'll find another way. There's always another way. You can't hide from death forever, and I can wait a little longer. Not much longer, but long enough. Then he was gone, and I sat in my armchair, still wrapped in my blanket, holding a cup of poisoned tea I hadn't drunk. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't crying, I was thinking about the woman I'd been, the one who would have been devastated by those words, destroyed by that betrayal. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I pulled out my phone and called the detective. Did you get all that? Every word, she confirmed, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. Martha, that's more than enough. We can arrest him tonight. No, I interrupted. Not yet. I want to do one more thing. Martha, I need to see my lawyer, I said, a plan forming with crystal clarity. I need to change my will, because Daniel was right about one thing. I can't live forever, but I can make damn sure he gets nothing when I'm gone. The next morning, I met with Robert Chen, a lawyer who'd been my friend for 20 years. We'd met when I'd hired him to handle my first and only legal matter, making sure Daniel would inherit everything if something happened to me. How ironic. Martha, Robert said, reading the concern in my face. What's wrong? I told him everything. About the poison, the recordings, Daniel's confession. I watched his face go from disbelief to horror to fury. That son of a... He caught himself. I'm so sorry, Martha. What can I do? I want to change my will, I said firmly. Everything goes to charity. The house, my life insurance, everything. Daniel gets nothing. And I want it documented why. I want it stated clearly that he attempted to murder me for this inheritance, and he's being denied it as a result. Robert nodded slowly. We can do that. Absolutely. But Martha, are you sure? What if somehow he's found not guilty? What if, then he still gets nothing, I said. Because even if the legal system fails me, I won't reward attempted murder. This is my house, Robert. I built it, and I get to decide what happens to it. We spent 3 hours crafting an ironclad will that would ensure Daniel's greed would get him nothing but justice. Every I dotted, every T crossed, every possible loophole closed. When we finished, I felt lighter than I had in months. Because whatever happened now, whether Daniel was convicted or acquitted, whether I lived for another day or another 20 years, he would never get what he wanted. The house he'd tried to kill me for would go to women's shelters, helping other women rebuild their lives. The insurance money would fund programs for the elderly, protecting them from the kind of abuse I'd suffered. My death would have meaning beyond his profit. And that, I realized, was its own kind of victory. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since this nightmare began. Not because the danger was over. Daniel was still out there, still plotting, still waiting for me to die. But because I'd taken back control. I'd stopped being a victim and become something else. A woman who built her life once and could protect it now. A mother who loved enough to recognize when love needed to end. A survivor who understood that sometimes justice starts with a simple word. No. No, you can't have my house. No, you can't have my money. No, you can't murder me and profit from it. Just, no. And there was power in that. More power than Daniel had ever given me credit for. He wanted to find another way. Let him try. I was ready. The days that followed were strange, quiet, like the stillness before a storm breaks, when the air feels heavy with electricity, and every nerve knows something is coming, even if the eyes can't see it yet. Daniel didn't come by for 3 days after his outburst. No calls, no texts, no poisoned tea delivered with fake smiles. Just silence. And in that silence, I prepared. The detective visited me at Patricia's house, where I'd been staying more often now. We sat at her kitchen table, going over the evidence one more time, making sure everything was documented, verified, airtight. His confession on the recording, that alone is enough, Detective Morrison said, reviewing her notes. Combined with the toxicology reports, the poisoned items from your home, the pattern of visits coinciding with your symptoms, Martha, this case is solid. When we arrest him, he won't walk away from this. When, not if, when. I nodded, but something still bothered me. What about Amanda? His girlfriend? She knew. She had to know. The detective's expression darkened. We're looking into her involvement. The conversations you recorded suggest she was at minimum complicit, at worst an active conspirator. But right now, our focus is Daniel. We need to time this perfectly. Time it how? She leaned forward, her voice low and serious. We wait until he makes another attempt. We've been monitoring his movements, his purchases. He bought more rat poison last week, the kind that contains arsenic. He's planning something, Martha, and when he makes his move, we'll be there. The thought should have terrified me. My son, plotting another way to kill me while the police used me as bait. But I felt strangely calm. Because this time, I knew. This time, I was ready. This time, I wasn't a victim waiting to be saved. I was part of the plan to bring him down. What do you need me to do? I asked. Go back home. Let him know you're alone. Be vulnerable. And wear this. She slid a small device across the table. It's a wire. Video and audio. We'll have officers nearby, watching everything. The moment he tries something, we move in. I picked up the device, feeling its weight in my palm. So small, yet it represented everything. Justice. Closure. The end of this nightmare. When? I asked. Tomorrow. We've intercepted some messages between Daniel and Amanda. They're planning something for tomorrow night. They think you're weak enough now that they can be more direct. More direct. Meaning what? Would he try to smother me? Push me down the stairs? Or just force the poison down my throat? Tired of waiting for me to die on his preferred timeline, I went home that evening, to the house that had been my sanctuary and become my prison. But it felt different now. I wasn't the same woman who'd lived here in ignorance, trusting her son with her life. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd looked death in the face and decided to fight back. I walked through each room slowly, touching things, remembering. The wall where Daniel's height marks were, the kitchen where I'd made his birthday cakes, the living room where we'd watched movies together, him falling asleep with his head on my shoulder. All of it real, all of it precious, all of it poisoned now by what he'd become. I found myself in his old room again, sitting on that bed where we'd looked at glow-in-the-dark stars and talked about the future. I pulled out the box I kept in his closet, the one filled with his childhood treasures. Report cards, artwork, little notes he'd written me over the years. One caught my eye. Dear Mom, you are the best mom in the whole world. I love you infinity. Love, Daniel. Age 8. I love you infinity. I held that note in my hands and let myself cry one last time. Not for the man who'd tried to kill me, but for the boy who'd written those words and meant them. For the child who'd loved me before greed corrupted him. For the son I'd lost long before I'd discovered he was trying to murder me. Then I put the note back in the box, closed it, and placed it in the closet. That boy was gone. Had been gone for years. Probably. I'd just been too blind to see it. The woman who grieved for him could be gone too, could make room for the woman who demanded justice. I spent the evening preparing, not preparing to die, preparing to live. I wrote letters to the few people who mattered. Patricia, thanking her for her friendship and support. Robert, my lawyer, with additional instructions about my estate. Even one to Daniel, though I didn't know if I'd ever give it to him. In it, I wrote the truth, that I'd loved him more than my own life, that I'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities I never had, that I'd believed in him even when the evidence suggested I shouldn't, and that despite everything, despite the poison and the betrayal and the cold calculation of my murder, I forgave him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. I signed it, sealed it, and left it on my dresser. Then I put on the wire the detective had given me, practiced looking frail and confused, and waited. Daniel called at 7 p.m., right on schedule. Mom, I'm sorry I haven't been by. Work has been crazy, but I'm coming over tonight with dinner. I miss you. I miss you. The lies came so easily to him now. That would be nice, sweetheart, I said, my voice weak and trembling, not entirely an act. I've been feeling very poorly indeed. I know, Mom. That's why I'm bringing something special. Something that will make you feel all better. Something special. The final dose? The direct approach Detective Morrison had warned me about? I'll be waiting, I told him. After hanging up, I sat in my living room and waited. Somewhere outside, I knew, police were positioning themselves, watching, recording, ready to move the moment Daniel revealed his intent. But in that moment of waiting, I wasn't thinking about the police or the plan or what was about to happen. I was thinking about all the mothers throughout history who'd loved sons who didn't deserve it, who'd sacrificed for children who saw that sacrifice as weakness rather than strength, who'd given everything and received betrayal in return. I thought about Abraham, asked to sacrifice Isaac, except in my story, Isaac had handed his mother the knife and asked her to hurry up. I thought about Mary, watching her son die, except I was watching my son kill, and the victim was me. I thought about all the women who'd built homes with their bare hands, only to have them taken by people who'd never understand what it cost to create something from nothing. And I understood, finally, that this wasn't just about me and Daniel. This was about every woman who'd been made invisible in her own story, who'd been told her worth was less than property, who'd been expected to accept betrayal with grace and dignity. Well, I was done with grace. Dignity, yes. I'd face this with my head high. But grace? Forgiveness without accountability? Love without limits? No. Some things were unforgivable, and attempting to murder your mother for a house was one of them. At 8:30 p.m., I heard his key in the lock. The same key I'd given him years ago, when I'd wanted him to always feel welcome in his home. "Mom?" he called out. "I'm here." "In the living room," I called back, my voice quavering. He appeared in the doorway, carrying takeout bags and wearing an expression of concern that might have fooled me once, but now looked like a mask. Amanda was with him, I noticed. Interesting. Were they planning to do this together? "You look terrible, Mom," he said, and I couldn't tell if it was satisfaction or actual concern in his voice. Maybe he couldn't tell either anymore. "I feel terrible," I admitted. "I can barely get out of bed most days." "Well, we're going to fix that," he said, unpacking the food. "I brought your favorite, chicken soup, and fresh bread, and of course your tea. Of course, the tea." Amanda busied herself in my kitchen, and I heard the sounds of preparation, water boiling, cups clinking, the small noises of my own murder being arranged with domestic efficiency. "You know, Mom," Daniel said, sitting beside me, "Amanda and I have been talking. We think maybe it's time you considered a nursing home, somewhere with full-time care. You're not safe here alone." "I'm not alone," I said quietly. "You're here. Aren't you taking care of me?" Something flickered across his face. "Of course. But I can't be here all the time. And you're getting worse. What if something happens when I'm not here? What if the poison finally works and I die alone," he meant. "What if you have to explain why you weren't there to save me?" Amanda returned with the tea, handing it to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Here you go, Martha. Daniel made it special. Just for you." I took the cup, and under the pretense of trembling hands, I tilted it slightly. The liquid inside was darker than normal tea, thicker. And the smell. Underneath the chamomile, there was something chemical, bitter. This wasn't just arsenic. This was something stronger. Something meant to finish the job tonight. "Drink up, Mom," Daniel encouraged. "All of it. It's important." I raised the cup to my lips, and time seemed to slow down. I saw Daniel leaning forward, eager, Amanda watching with calculation in her eyes. And I thought about all the times I'd drunk poison from this same cup, trusting the person who gave it to me. But not anymore. "Actually," I said, lowering the cup, "I'm not thirsty." Daniel's face hardened. "Mom, drink the tea." I said I'm not thirsty. "Drink the tea." His voice was steel now, all pretense gone. "No." The word hung in the air between us. Simple, final, complete. "What did you say?" He stood up, towering over me. I said, "No, Daniel. I'm not drinking your poison anymore." His face went pale, then red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You've been poisoning me for months. Arsenic in my tea, in my food, in everything you brought me. And now this. I held up the cup. Whatever this is supposed to be the final dose. Amanda backed toward the door, but Daniel stood frozen, his mask completely shattered. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice shook. Can't I? I stood up, stronger than I'd appeared in weeks. Every cup of tea, every meal, every concerned visit, all recorded, all documented, all evidence of attempted murder. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled aside my cardigan, showing the wire. Say hello to the police, Daniel. They've been listening this whole time. The color drained from his face completely. And that's when the front door burst open, and Detective Morrison walked in with 4 uniformed officers behind her. Daniel Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder. I didn't hear the rest. I just watched as they put handcuffs on my son, as they read him his rights, as he finally faced consequences for what he'd tried to do. He looked at me one last time as they led him away, not with remorse, not with apology, but with pure, undiluted hatred. This is all your fault, he spat. If you just died when you were supposed to. But I didn't, I said calmly. I survived, and now you'll pay for trying to kill me. As they took him away, Amanda too in handcuffs, the house fell silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. The silence of justice, the silence of survival, the silence of a woman who'd faced death and chosen life instead. I walked to my kitchen and poured the poisoned tea down the sink, watching it swirl away down the drain. Then I made myself a cup of real tea, chamomile with honey, nothing added, and sat in my living room, in my house, in the home I'd built. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. The trial was set for 3 months later, and those 3 months were the strangest of my life. I was alive, truly alive, for the first time since discovering Daniel's betrayal. The poison was out of my system, my strength was returning, and my body was healing. But my heart? That was a different story. They offered me victim support groups, counseling, therapy, well-meaning people who wanted to help me process the trauma of my son trying to murder me. But how do you process something like that? How do you sit in a circle with strangers and explain that the baby you nursed, the child you raised, the man you sacrificed everything for had measured your life in dollars and found it wanting? I went to one session, just one. A woman there was crying about her daughter stealing from her. Another talked about her son's drug addiction draining her savings. Painful stories, all of them. But when it was my turn to share, when I said, "My son tried to kill me for my house," the room went silent. Because there are levels of betrayal, and attempted murder sits in a category all its own. I didn't go back. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, not just my health, but my life. I planted new flowers in the garden Daniel and Amanda had walked through discussing renovations. I repainted the kitchen they'd called outdated. I reinforced every corner of my home they'd tried to claim, making it mine again in ways that went beyond legal ownership. Patricia became a true friend during this time, not just a concerned neighbor. She helped me understand something crucial, that Daniel's betrayal said nothing about my worth as a mother and everything about his character as a man. You gave him everything, she said one afternoon as we sat in my garden. Love, sacrifice, opportunity. What he did with those gifts, that's on him, not you. I wanted to believe her. Some days I did. Other days I lay awake wondering where I'd gone wrong, what I'd missed, what I could have done differently to prevent my son from becoming a man who could poison his own mother. The prosecution built their case with methodical precision. The physical evidence was damning. Arsenic in the tea, in the honey, in the vitamins. The recordings were even worse. Daniel's voice, cold and calculating, talking about my death like it was a minor inconvenience delaying his plans. His lawyer tried to build a defense around mental illness, temporary insanity, even suggested I might have poisoned myself for attention. But the evidence was too strong, too clear, too undeniable. The day of the trial, I wore my best dress. Not the one I'd saved for special occasions, but a new one I'd bought specifically for this day. Navy blue, professional, dignified. I wanted the jury to see a woman who'd survived, not a victim who'd been broken. The courtroom was cold, institutional, nothing like the television dramas I'd occasionally watched. Daniel sat at the defense table in a suit I'd probably helped pay for years ago, looking nothing like my son. His lawyer had coached him well. He appeared remorseful, broken, a good man who'd made terrible mistakes. But I knew better. I'd seen his real face, heard his real voice, understood his real nature. The prosecution called me to the stand first. "Mrs. Morrison, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant?" I looked at Daniel, and he looked back at me, and for a moment, I was transported back 32 years to the delivery room, to the first time I'd held him, to the overwhelming love I'd felt for this tiny person who'd made me a mother. Then I remembered the poison in my tea, and I answered, "He's my son, or he was. I'm not sure what he is now." The prosecutor guided me through the story, the years of sacrifice, the gradual symptoms, the discovery of the poisoning, the recordings. I kept my voice steady, my emotions in check. This wasn't about breaking down and earning sympathy. This was about stating facts, presenting truth, demanding justice. When they played the recordings, I watched the jury's faces change. Shock, horror, disgust. They heard Daniel's voice cold and cruel. "Just hurry up and finish it already." They heard him calculate my worth. "The math doesn't work in your favor anymore." They heard him threaten, "I'll find another way. There's always another way." His lawyer tried to rehabilitate him during cross-examination. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true that you and your son have had a strained relationship?" "No, I loved him completely." "Isn't it true that you've always been controlling? That you use the house as leverage to keep him dependent on you?" "No, I built that house so he'd always have security, always have a home." "Isn't it possible you misinterpreted his actions, that what you saw as attempted murder was actually—" "No." I turned to look directly at the jury. "There's no misinterpreting arsenic in tea. There's no alternate explanation for months of systematic poisoning. My son tried to kill me because he wanted what I'd built, and he didn't want to wait for me to die naturally. The lawyer tried to shake me, to make me seem vindictive or confused or unreliable, but I'd survived 32 years of widowhood and poverty. I'd built a house with my own hands. I'd raised a child alone. I'd survived being poisoned by that same child. I wasn't going to be shaken by a lawyer in a suit." When the medical examiner testified about the arsenic levels in my blood, about how much longer I might have survived if I'd continued drinking the poison, the courtroom went silent. 6 months, maybe 8. That's how long I'd had left. Daniel had been patient, methodical, willing to spend months slowly killing his mother rather than risk a more obvious method. Amanda testified too, cutting a deal with the prosecution for a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation. She admitted knowing about the poison, helping to prepare it, encouraging Daniel when he grew impatient. She painted him as the mastermind and herself as a reluctant participant, and maybe that was even partially true, but she'd still handed me that final cup of tea, the one meant to finish me off that night. She'd still smiled while offering me death. The jury saw through her performance. I could tell by their faces. The defense called character witnesses, people who knew Daniel as a successful professional, a charming friend, a good man who couldn't possibly have done what he was accused of. They talked about his accomplishments, his promise, his potential, everything I'd sacrificed to give him, everything he'd been willing to throw away for a house. When it was Daniel's turn to testify, his lawyer advised him not to. Too risky, too much evidence against him. But Daniel insisted. He wanted his say, wanted to convince the jury that somehow this was all a misunderstanding. I watched him take the stand, watched him raise his right hand and swear to tell the truth, and wondered if he even knew what truth meant anymore. "I love my mother," he said, his voice breaking perfectly on cue. "I would never hurt her. Everything I did was to help her, to care for her." The prosecutor stood. "Then why did we find arsenic in her tea?" "I don't know. Maybe someone else. Who else had access to her home every single day?" "I don't know. Why did you tell her to hurry up and finish it already if you love her so much?" "I was frustrated. I didn't mean—" "What didn't you mean? That you wanted her dead? That you were tired of waiting for her to die? That the math didn't work in your favor anymore?" "I was just talking. I didn't—" "You didn't what? Didn't poison her? Didn't try to kill her? Didn't calculate that she was worth more dead than alive?" "Objection," his lawyer shouted, but the damage was done. Daniel crumbled on the stand, his carefully constructed image of the devoted son shattering under the weight of his own recorded words. He tried to explain, to justify, to make the jury understand that he'd been under stress, that Amanda had pressured him, that he'd never really meant to go through with it. But you don't accidentally poison someone for months. You don't accidentally research lethal doses. You don't accidentally hand your mother a cup of tea laced with enough arsenic to finish the job. The closing arguments were powerful on both sides. The defense painted Daniel as a troubled young man who'd made terrible choices under pressure. The prosecution painted him as a calculating murderer who'd spent months systematically trying to kill his mother for financial gain. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours during which I sat in the hallway, drinking coffee that tasted like nothing, trying not to think about what would happen if they found him not guilty, if he walked free, if he came after me again. But then the bailiff called us back, and I knew from the jury's faces before the foreman even spoke. We find the defendant, Daniel Morrison, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, final and absolute. Guilty. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there, feeling something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Justice. Daniel's face went white, then red. He turned to look at me, and the hatred in his eyes was pure and undiluted. No more pretense of love, no more masks, just rage that I'd survived, that I'd fought back, that I'd won. "This is your fault," he screamed as they led him away. "You selfish bitch! You couldn't just die! You couldn't just give me what I deserved!" The judge ordered him removed, and his voice echoed down the hallway. "I hope you die alone in that house. I hope it falls down on you. I hope." Then the doors closed, and there was silence. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge showed no mercy. "Mr. Morrison, you attempted to murder the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed everything for you, who loved you unconditionally. You did so with premeditation, with calculation, and with a callousness that defies understanding. This court sentences you to 25 years to life in prison. 25 years to life." He'd be nearly 60 when he became eligible for parole. Older than I was now. Old enough to understand, perhaps, what he'd tried to take from me. As they led him away to begin his sentence, he didn't look at me, didn't speak. Just walked out of the courtroom and out of my life, replaced by a prisoner number and a cell in a facility 300 miles away. I walked out of that courthouse into bright sunshine, into a world where my son was in prison, and I was free. Free from poison, from fear, from the constant vigilance required to survive someone who wanted you dead. Patricia was waiting for me, and Dr. Patterson, and Robert, my lawyer. People who'd helped me, supported me, believed me when my own son had tried to make me doubt my own survival. "It's over," Patricia said, hugging me tight. "Yes," I agreed. "It's over." But as I drove home, to my house, my sanctuary, my hard-won security, I realized it wasn't over. Not really. Because I still had to figure out how to live with what had happened. How to exist in a world where my son was in prison for trying to kill me. How to be a mother to a child who'd stopped being my son long before I'd stopped being his mother. That was the real challenge. Not surviving the poison, but surviving the aftermath. And I wasn't sure yet if I was strong enough for that. 2 years have passed since that day in the courtroom. 2 years since I heard the word guilty and felt the weight of betrayal begin to lift from my shoulders. 2 years of learning how to live again, not just survive. The house is still mine. I still live here, surrounded by memories that no longer hurt quite as much as they once did. I've made new memories too. Patricia and I have dinner here every Tuesday, a tradition that's become sacred. Robert visits sometimes, bringing legal documents that need signing, but mostly bringing friendship. Even Dr. Patterson stops by occasionally to check on the patient who survived the unsurvivable. I've renovated Daniel's old room, not destroyed it, not erased it, but transformed it. Now it's a guest room, painted a soft sage green, furnished with pieces I chose myself. The glow-in-the-dark stars are gone, but sometimes at night, I still remember the child who looked at them with wonder and promised to take care of me someday. That child did exist once. I have to believe that. The boy who wrote "I love you infinity" was real. even if the man he became betrayed everything that child had promised. I've learned something these past 2 years. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the hook they put you on. Daniel is in prison, and he'll be there for a very long time. That's justice. But the peace I've found? That's forgiveness. Not of him, but of myself. I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner, for trusting when I should have questioned, for loving so completely that I made myself vulnerable to someone who saw that love as weakness. Because that's what mothers do. We love, we trust, we sacrifice, and sometimes, God help us, we're betrayed by the very people we die for. But that doesn't mean we were wrong to love. It means they were wrong to betray. I've met other women since then, through the support groups I eventually joined, through the advocacy work I never expected to do. Women whose children stole from them, abandoned them, abused them, yes, even tried to kill them. Each story is different, but the pain is the same. The shattering realization that the child you die for wants you dead, or gone, or silent, or simply out of the way. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. You are not responsible for who they became. You gave them love, opportunity, foundation. What they built on that foundation, or what they tried to tear down, that's on them. Some believe me. Some aren't ready to yet. I understand. It took me months to accept it myself. The house that Daniel tried to kill me for? In my revised will, it goes to a foundation I've established. One that helps women rebuild after family betrayal. Women who've been financially abused by children or spouses. Women who've lost everything to the greed of people who are supposed to love them. Women who need to know that starting over at 60 or 70 or 80 is not only possible, but powerful. I've already started the work, even before I'm gone. The foundation operates out of my dining room, the room Daniel and Amanda walked through, discussing demolition. Now it's filled with filing cabinets and a computer and phone calls from women who need help, who need hope, who need someone to tell them they're not crazy for feeling betrayed by their own family. Last month, I helped a 72-year-old woman escape her son's financial control. 3 weeks ago, I connected a grandmother with legal aid after her daughter tried to have her declared incompetent to steal her home. Yesterday, I sat with a woman my age who'd just discovered her son had been stealing her Social Security checks for years. Each one breaks my heart. Each one makes me stronger. Because I understand now. Daniel didn't just try to take my house. He tried to take my voice, my agency, my right to exist on my own terms. And in failing to kill me, he gave me something he never intended: purpose beyond survival. I received a letter from him 6 months ago. The prison forwarded it through my lawyer, asking if I wanted to receive correspondence from the inmate. I almost said no, almost burned it without reading. But curiosity won. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on prison stationery. It started with Mom, and for a moment, my heart clenched with old, familiar pain. He wrote about prison life, about therapy sessions, about finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. He said he was sorry. Really, truly sorry. He said he loved me, that he'd always loved me, that he didn't know how he'd become the kind of person who could poison his own mother. He asked if I could ever forgive him, if there was any chance someday that we could rebuild our relationship. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't answer. Because here's the truth. I do forgive him. I've done the work, made my peace, released the anger that was poisoning me more surely than arsenic ever did. But forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened or exposing myself to someone who's proven capable of trying to kill me. Forgiveness, I've learned, can exist alongside boundaries, alongside self-protection, alongside the simple truth that some betrayals are too profound to ever fully heal. Maybe someday I'll write back. Maybe when he served more time, shown more change, proven that his remorse is real and lasting. Or maybe I won't. Maybe this is where our story ends, with him in prison and me in the house he tried to steal. Both of us alive but forever separated by choices he made and consequences he earned. I don't know yet, and that's okay. I've learned to live with uncertainty. What I do know is this. I'm 62 years old now. I've survived widowhood, poverty, and my own son's attempt to murder me. I've built a house, raised a child, and rebuilt a life after watching it all nearly crumble. I've learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up, even when every bone in your body screams to stay down. I've learned that love can coexist with betrayal, that you can grieve someone who's still alive, that being a mother doesn't mean being a martyr. I've learned that houses are just buildings, but homes are what you make them. And I've made mine into something more than Daniel ever imagined. Not just shelter for me, but sanctuary for others who need to know they can survive family betrayal. Most importantly, I've learned that you can't kill a woman who's already survived everything else the world could throw at her. You can poison her tea, plan her funeral, measure her worth in dollars and real estate. But if she's the kind of woman who built something from nothing once, she'll do it again, and again, and again, as many times as it takes. I water my garden now, the one I planted after the trial. Roses that bloom despite the harsh sun, vegetables that grow despite the rocky soil, life that persists despite everything that tried to destroy it. Patricia comes outside, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. We sit on the porch I refinished myself, looking at the yard where Daniel once played as a boy. "Do you ever regret it?" she asks. "Pressing charges, testifying, all of it?" I think about it, really think about it. Do I regret watching my son be sentenced to prison? Do I wish I'd just died, given him what he wanted, made everything easier? No, I say finally. The only thing I regret is that it came to this. But stopping him, protecting myself, demanding justice, never. Because here's what I want other women to know, women who might be where I was, loving someone who wants them gone. Your life has value beyond what others can gain from your death. Your home is yours, built with your sacrifice, earned by your survival. Your voice matters, even when they try to silence it. Your strength is real, even when they tell you you're weak. And your right to exist, to fight back, to demand justice, that's not negotiable. Daniel wanted my house. He got a prison cell. He wanted my silence. He got my testimony. He wanted my death. He got my survival. And in the end, that's the best revenge. Not revenge at all, really, but simply refusing to die when someone decides you should. Simply continuing to exist, to thrive, to build new things on the foundation they tried to destroy. I'm still here, in my house, living my life, helping other women find their strength. And every morning when I wake up, when I make my tea, real tea, safe tea, tea I make myself, I think about Daniel in his cell, and I feel not joy at his suffering, but peace at my survival. He tried to erase me. Instead, he freed me from the obligation to keep loving someone who wanted me dead, freed me from the burden of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't, freed me from the cage of a mother's love that had become my prison. Now I love on my terms. I trust with wisdom, not blindness. I give, but not at the cost of my own survival. I've learned that sometimes the people who teach us the hardest lessons are the ones we'd have died to protect. And sometimes surviving them, really, truly surviving them, means more than physical survival. It means reclaiming your story, your voice, your right to say, "This is my life, my house, my legacy, and you cannot have it." 3 years ago, I was dying in this house, poisoned by love turned toxic. Today, I'm living in it, stronger than I've ever been. And that's not just justice. That's victory. I finish my lemonade and stand up, ready to go inside and answer emails from women who need help, who need hope, who need to know that survival is possible even after the worst betrayal. Patricia follows me, asking about dinner plans, about the garden, about ordinary, beautiful things that make up a life well lived. And I answer her, grateful for this moment, this day, this second chance at life that Daniel tried to take but couldn't, because the woman who builds a house from nothing doesn't crumble when someone tries to take it. She builds again, better, stronger, wiser, and she helps others build too. That's my legacy now. Not the house Daniel wanted, but the strength he couldn't destroy. And in the end, that's worth more than any inheritance he could have claimed. I learned that sometimes it's the silence that speaks loudest. My silence when he expected compliance. My silence when he thought I'd never fight back. my silence before I found my voice and used it to demand justice. And now, I'm not silent anymore. If this story touched you, if you've survived something you thought would destroy you, if you're still fighting battles others can't see, know this: you're stronger than you think, and your story isn't over yet. Thank you for listening to mine. May it give you courage for yours.